Welcome to Perspectives, Unwrapping Transformation. This three-part series is not just about survival, it's about evolution. You're about to hear the story of a man, my friend, my former colleague, John Barron, but a man who built a career in the highest rooms of corporate power and then faced a moment that stripped away all the titles, meetings, and expectations. Prostate cancer. For many, it's a diagnosis. For him, it became a doorway to redefining success, a mirror held up to his values, and ultimately a rebirth. This is a conversation about fear, resilience, and the sacred transformation that follows life's most unwanted invitations. So let's begin. You and I share something together, and that's that we've both had cancer. I had cancer when I was 18 years old, and you're going through that, and I want to dig into that a little bit and understand what has transformed in my life since that moment, and how are you transforming through this experience. I just think that when people have such a traumatic experience, you find yourself, or people find themselves digging deep into their soul to find a passion or a purpose that really drives them. And it kind of brings something out in them, a drive that's just sometimes unseen, right? It brings out that person that they've been itching to have come out, or to do things that they've been wanting to do for so long. And so I know that you're doing some of that now. I know I've done some of that. I'm actually doing a lot of that now with the writing and this podcast or these interviews that I'm doing. And so I want to dig into that a little bit. But what I'd love to do is have you tell listeners a little bit about you. You and I met at a Fortune 4 company. We both worked at a Fortune 4 company. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what got you there.
Yeah, well, thanks, Randy. I think we've talked about our shared stories regarding cancer and just the type of transformation that can trigger. That cancer didn't just change my life, but it really triggered a transformation. I went from fear to focus, and from despair to discipline. And through what I call the tides: treatment, inspiration, diet, exercise, and sleep, I found 5 ways to fight back. And in helping others discover those same tools, I found something I really never expected to find, which is purpose, joy, and the will to keep going. And not just for me, but for the 315,000 others in the United States who are diagnosed with prostate cancer every year. And roughly 36,000 of those, according to the American Cancer Society, are likely to die from their cancer. So for me, it was completely transformational. So I really enjoyed hearing your story and how that's motivated you to probe the stories of others. In terms of how I ended up at CVS, I was one of 3 boys, and my father passed away of scleroderma when I was younger. And my mother, on a nurse's salary, raised me and my 2 brothers. And I think her passion for healthcare ultimately we all ended up in healthcare in one way or the other. And eventually I met some executives for Staples, Tom Stenberg, the CEO, and Todd Krasnow, the EVP of sales and marketing, and just some great business people. And we started a business together back in 1998. And then CVS, we had a loyalty program at that business, and it got written up as a best-in-class loyalty program. And they reached out to learn more about what we were doing. They saw the write-up in Peppers and Rogers, and they said, "Could we learn more about your loyalty program?" And so a bunch of CVS executives interviewed me about our loyalty program. And then about a year later, sort of out of the blue, I got this phone call inviting me to join CVS and sort of lead the national rollout of the Extra Care loyalty program.
So those were really exciting times, right? You were actually I mean, the loyalty program at CVS was one of the largest loyalty programs, if not the largest loyalty program at the
Yeah.
time of any company. So you led in that effort, which is very exciting, right? To bring an idea and a concept and something that's worked for you into an organization and lead had to have been a real thrill at that point in your career.
It was. And CVS was expanding rapidly through acquisition, and Extra Care was already the largest or almost the largest loyalty program with over 30 million cardholders. And I think by the time I moved into another role at CVS, I think we were up over 70 or 80 million cardholders.
Right. And so what I remember about you, because I mean, by the time I think we all left, there were probably what 300,000 employees at the company. You and I had been there, I think, since the 2005-06 timeframe. I think you had been there a little while. And I remember you through the years as a real champion of culture, a real champion of people, ensuring that people developed. You were intentional in how you managed and led. You were part of our big executive councils to ensure that we were driving culture shaping. That was, am I correct to say that that's really
Yeah,
how you led as an executive at CVS?
an awesome observation, Randy, and I'm so glad that I made that impression on you because when I first got into my career in management, I defined management as the accomplishment of objectives through others. And over time, I learned that purpose-driven management was really the development of others through the accomplishment of objectives. And so my mission became the development of others and not the accomplishment of the objectives. That simply became a way to measure whether or not I was successful in developing others. If you accomplished the objectives, you were probably successful in developing the others. So the accomplishment of the objectives became not the ends in and of themselves, but a means of developing other people. And that was something I was really passionate about, and it really fueled my motivation to manage others and to lead.
Right. So then what happened? So you were at CVS, and again, such a large company. I know that you moved, across different departments and divisions and led different teams. Then I didn't see John Barron anymore. What happened?
Yeah, so I went from extra care to leading all of the marketing enterprises for the retail components of the business. And that's probably where you saw a lot of me. And then I was asked by actually Larry was ultimately the person who asked me, but to head up this project management organization so that the strategic growth initiatives, and CVS at the time had roughly 12 of them, they were sort of stuck in the mud. The company had launched these massive objectives to help grow the business, and they had put these terrific leaders in charge of each of these different strategic objectives. And those leaders, while good at their jobs, didn't necessarily have the knowledge of navigating the organization and obtaining the resources they needed to get these very complicated cross-functional, cross-enterprise projects, free to get them unstuck from the mud. And I remember in my first conversation about this role with Larry, he said, that your job is to get these guys unstuck. And he had said, you have this proven record of accomplishing lots of things and not getting stuck in the mud. So teach them how you do that and help them do that. And so my role at that point became this sort of vast marketing role, which covered, retail front store and pharmacy marketing, to a much more focused role working with a dozen or so of the company's best executives in helping them get their projects, their strategic projects resourced and get the IT resources and the capital funding and to develop the metrics and milestones so they could, so you could be accountable to producing in exchange for those resources. And so that then so I sort of disappeared from the public eye a little bit because it was a much more narrow focus. And then that even further, that was presented to me as this is not a permanent, this is a job that we think will last 18 to 24 months. This is something we need you to help do. And then after that, if you want to go back to marketing, you can go, tell us what you want to do after that. And after that, Helena was my supervisor, and she basically came to me with a suggestion and said, "Hey, we're sort of at the end of the 18 months. Have you given any thought about, what's next for John Barron?" And I said, "Well, no, I was waiting for this conversation to start thinking about that, and I will." And she said, "I really think you would be great if you could lead the digital operations and planning, because that initiative is so critical to our future." At that time, CVS had not even sent its first text message to a customer, and the digital team had about 12 people on it. But she said this team's going to need to grow like wildfire, and so I said, "Gee, I hadn't considered that." I said, "Let me come back." It was a Friday we had this conversation. I said, "Let me come back to you on Monday with some other candidates who I think would be great for that role." In other words, I sort of had dismissed it almost outright without thinking about it. And then I took the weekend and thought about it. And in doing so, I said, "Gee, I think Helena's right. I probably would be really good at this role. And certainly it's a good thing for me to build a skill set in the digital world." And so I came back on Monday and said, "Hey, I'm very interested in this." And she said, "Boy, you really did a nice head fake on Friday, because I was absolutely convinced that there was no chance you were gonna bite." So anyway, so I ended up on the digital team. And again, that's where I probably even further removed from visibility, because I worked in a different building down the street from the main building, and I had an office in Boston as well. So it completely changed not just what I did, but where I did it. So that's another reason.
So you mentioned you dropped the names Larry and Helena, and I'm bringing this up because that demonstrates at the level that you were working at and you were engaging. So Larry was Larry Merlo, the CEO of CVS Health, and Helena Folks, who was the president of the retail division and really led the big branding and marketing efforts for the company that really established that organization as the brand that everybody knew, a healthcare destination, right? And I bring that up because you were being asked to move and shake in areas by those executives because of what you brought to the table. And so I bring that up because when you think about success for you, what did that look like? Like, what did you want success to be for John Barron at that time? Like, what was success defined like for you?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. I think I define success. Well, certainly the way the success was more or less defined for me was in how successful these initiative leaders would be in producing the value that they forecasted for the business. For me personally, I thought of my objectives somewhat differently. I thought my objectives were much more to help these leaders that were leading these strategic growth initiatives develop the skill sets necessary to understand how to influence the organization to receive resources in exchange for evidence-based commitments that they could fulfill their goals, because it was going to take years for these initiatives to really produce the kind of I think CVS underestimated the timeline that it was going to take some of these initiatives to produce. And so I didn't really see my metrics the same way, I think, as probably my sponsors did. I viewed them much more as how to get the folks I was working closely with to understand, how to do what they needed to do. These were all terrific executives,
Right.
but they were great at achieving things, but they had different levels of skills at influencing the organization and understanding the exchange of capital for realistic commitments and expectations and milestones and metrics for their own growth initiatives. And that's really, I wanted to see that growth in them as sort of my milestones for success involved seeing that growth in them.
And so when you think about that period of time, right? Again, we both got there around the same time. We came into a company that was about $50 billion or 45 billion or maybe a little more. It was about the 50th largest company in the country.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when we walked away from that company, it was the fourth largest company in the country, and it was close to, was it 300 billion, I think it was, like right
Yeah. Yeah.
before
I think
COVID.
when I joined CVS in 2006, it was the 53rd
Yeah.
on the 500, right? And it was fourth when I left in 2019. And I think it was 265 billion when I left in 2019, but you were there longer than me, so it might have been over 300 at that time.
Yeah, it was after COVID because of the work in testing and deployment of the vaccine. Revenues shot up even more. So, and then the company purchased that, and then it just got huge, right? And so,
Yeah.
so I think, look, I think for most people listening to this and looking at your career, what an exciting trajectory, what an exciting career. You were at the highest levels of one of the largest companies that was innovating in healthcare, right? And now tell us about your new journey and your experience with cancer.